So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, guys, we're based out of Kansas City, and one of our favorite local businesses in the area is the Screenland Armour movie theater, which plays local independent movies in addition to big name titles, from the likes of Warner Brothers Studio. And we wanted to invite Adam Roberts on the stream today, who is the owner of the Screenland Armour, to talk a little bit about how his business and his livelihood has been affected by not only the pandemic, but especially this recent decree by Warner Brothers Studio, which has set up their entire 2021 movie slate to debut on HBO Max alongside the theatrical releases. So we're about to add to the stream Adam Roberts from the Screenland Armour. How's it going, Adam? Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess to just kick things off, we wanted to kind of get your overall, I guess, commentary on this Warner Brothers decision to go ahead and release their films onto HBO as opposed to exclusively in theaters.
I mean, it is quite the challenge and I guess shakeup from the industry standard. Since the announcement, it's been a tidal wave of kind of like, people coming out and either in praise of it or, if you're a filmmaker, I think you are criticizing it, especially the filmmakers that had no clue that this was going to happen when HBO dropped that this was, how the Warner Brothers slate was going to kind of unfold next year. We've seen, in particular, I think Denis Villeneuve and Christopher Nolan speaking out pretty strongly. But even Timothée Chalamet this weekend kind of low key did it on SNL by wearing a Legendary T-shirt in the closing monologue, which of course Legendary actually produced two of the biggest films that they're going to be releasing next year: Godzilla versus King Kong and Dune. And so it remains to be seen what happens there. And I think that'll be the first big step in the pushback. But, even some of the big, creative artist industries like Endeavor is speaking out against them. And they have a huge slate of both actors and directors. So I know the DGA was looking to do something. So it's potential you see some kind of strike against Warner Brothers. A lot of people outside of the Wonder Woman situation, which, they dealt individually with those filmmakers and worked out deals with them. A lot of these other people don't know how they're going to get paid. For example, with Dune, a lot of the cast and the crew took lower upfront costs and lower salaries to make the movie that they wanted to make in hopes that they would get more movies and also that it would make a ton of money and they'd get more in the back end. So they took less upfront. But now with this going streaming, it truly remains to be seen like how it actually works. So it's fascinating that Warner Brothers decided to just go ahead and change their entire slate. Well, to be clear, it wasn't Warner Brothers. It was AT&T. We haven't actually heard anybody from Warner Media specifically yet speak out about this, and you probably won't because they don't want to get fired. But AT&T made this decision here. But
which just shows how deep the whole. Just to point out, I mean, if AT&T is making the decisions for this, they're clearly not interested at all in the artistic integrity of the medium. They're clearly only focused on a bottom line. So
Yeah, and you mentioned Dune and King Kong versus Godzilla. Those are two of my most anticipated films of this year that got pushed back. But, those are two films that you absolutely would want to see in a theater. I can't imagine just, sitting here in my living room watching it on my TV. That's a movie where, you want to see King Kong roar on the big screen. That's not, or same with Dune. That's a visual, masterpiece that Denis and crew has been putting all this time and artistic energy into. It's such a shame, even just from a, purely artistic perspective, totally regardless of, the local business element. But just as a theater owner, what do you think this is going to, we talk about Dune. When that movie comes out, how many people do you think will just, end up staying home and watching it on HBO Max instead of coming out to some, business like the Screenland Armour to support it, to see it there?
Well, I think with these big films like, The Matrix, I think Dune and the like, I think that those will actually have the least impact. I think the biggest ones are going to be the sleeper hits or some of the original content. Mentioned on there is the fourth Conjuring film. Those movies that are under, maybe $50 million budgets that are a little bit smaller. I think people might see those as like, I'll just watch in my house, and it's more of an afterthought. So there's 17 films in the slate next year as of right now that are going to be day and date. It's a weird thing. I don't know how many people know exactly that the details are with it, but if you didn't know, like for Wonder Woman, for example, they're all following the same model as of now, which there's no early shows of Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman comes out Christmas Day, the same day it comes on HBO Max. There's no free trials of HBO Max, so you have to pay $15 a month to get all these, and then they're only available on HBO Max for 31 days, and then they go off of HBO Max, and then they're only in theaters for I think another 90 days after that. So it's very weird that how they're doing it. In my head, like there's a version of this that wouldn't have pissed anybody off and would have still benefited HBO Max. I think they should have done the opposite. I think it should have been a theatrical window. Right now it's a 90-day window. It's been all sorts of crazy this year because of COVID and the pandemic. So certainly that was always going to change. We've already seen it in the last couple of years, kind of going, slightly smaller dates. And what that means is there's a 90-day theatrical window where it can't go on premium VOD, it can't go to Redbox, can't go to Netflix, anything like that. Of course, we've seen that change. Universal has the deal with AMC to where, we saw it last week with Freaky and this week with Croods 2. But after 19 days theatrically, Universal titles can be on premium VOD, so you can rent it for $20 or whatever at home. But there's still like a little bit of theatrical window there. I would have thought if I was Warner Brothers, I would have the best of both worlds and do like a 30-day theatrical, and then on day 31, it's out of theaters and it's only on HBO Max. That would have not pissed anybody off. That would have let them probably make most of their money. Most box office is made in the first 2 to 3 weeks, unless you're Star Wars or Dune or something. But
why not do it that way then?
I don't think AT&T understands distribution, and they acquired this 98-year-old company, and they don't really know what to do with it. And I think that's where you're seeing, particularly like frustration from Chris Nolan. It's Warner Brothers is one of the last OG studios, and they seem to not really give a shit about how movies are made or released, and that I guess is flags for him probably of how they're created. And he was backing the studio that he thought and truly believed in, but now you have them doing the most opposite thing. So again, I don't think Warner Brothers proper is necessarily agreeing or behind any of this stuff, but they're someone above them is making the decisions here. For us, I don't know what it really means. I think it's a lot scarier if you're a big studio. I think we kind of cultivate a community and a crowd here. So streaming is not a new thing. We show Netflix movies here all the time, and people still pay to see them, even though most likely they have Netflix. Last year we had The Irishman, and it was one of our biggest films of last year. So a lot of people still come out and see movies, even if they get them at home for free. But certainly it changes the whole ecosystem of how movies are made. Because it's still a business, and people have to remember it's a business. So that's why this is just perplexing, because just looking at Wonder Woman, which likely would have made over $1 billion on a normal non-pandemic year. So they're foregoing that profit of $1 billion. The movie itself probably was between $200 and $250 million to make. And they're putting it on VOD or putting it on HBO Max in 4K. So the problem with that is, piracy has always been an issue, but certainly it's going to ramp up more the more different streaming options we see. But they're giving pirates a 4K copy of the movie, which just doesn't usually happen. Typically you'd see like a shitty cam or something from somebody for the first few months before you get a Blu-ray of it. But by that time, they've made so much money already. More people will still pay for it if it's available. So it'll probably make optimistically like $20 to $30 million in the first 2 weeks by the end of the year. I'll say like our pre-sales aren't great for it. Like they're pretty minimal, but I would also say that's probably the pandemic. People aren't planning that far ahead because things could change dramatically. But but I think what it'll do is it'll change how Warner Brothers might make a bunch of $20 or $30 or $40 million movies, and now those might not even go theatrical at all. And these like kind of smarter movies or more original IPs, they might completely disappear from their slates.
Yeah, which I guess that would be troubling to me as just a film fan and a fan of cinema to not see those, films that typically, obviously I'm as big a fan of anybody, as Gavin mentioned. We love we're super excited for the new Godzilla film. I'm super stoked for Dune, but some of the films that have, really meant a lot to me, it probably didn't mean a lot to other people. I can remember, at the Screenland Armour, probably my first time ever at the Screenland Armour, we saw The Zero Theorem by Terry Gilliam. And that to me strikes me as the kind of film that, you might not get to see in theaters, or a film like mid 90s or something, that's like a personal film that you can really connect to, which I think is one of the real downsides to what you're describing here. One of the, kind of counterpoints that Gavin and I have reflected on this show to the kind of changing dynamics of the film industry is you've mentioned how the Screenland Armour really cultivates a community. So there are a bunch of people who like to see everything at the Screenland Armour. You know, they want to see, 70s movies, old school stuff, the new stuff, right? And you guys obviously have an eclectic lineup of all sorts of films to see. You know, you'd likely be able to sustain an evolution of the industry. From my perspective, who really cares if AMC goes out of business, right? How does that impact? Is this better for independent cinemas if they're able to get everybody now, and this becomes like more of a niche market, and the big fish just don't even want to play in it anymore?
Well, I don't think AMC's of the world will ever go away. I think that they were always at a breakneck, bottleneck point to where they were going to have some level of collapse. I mean, for the last 10 years, technology in theaters has just been accelerating at an unbelievable pace. For more people, operations like mine, the classic cinemas, as you will, even for us, upgrading from film to digital has big expenses, and trying to keep up with nicer seating and different food and drink options, that all costs money. And if you're looking at like a 24 or 30 screen theater like these megaplexes have, first of all, there's no movies right now to really show to fill your screen. So that's what their problems right now are. For us, we've always been creative. We've shown everything. We've always done like sports on the big screen or TV on the big screen, and then private rentals. We've always done that type of stuff, and deeper cut movies. And so we've always done these things. So now it's like going to the future, people might be a little bit more precious where they're spending their money. I would imagine, not just for film, but for all entertainment. I hope that the pandemic might change some habits and might break people from just the easiest, closest location from their doorstep, which is our, as one of the only small people in Kansas City, that's always our biggest issue. But, you look at other theaters in other cities that are like us, they're like the most popular cinemas in those theaters. So I do think there will be like a renaissance of sorts for movie theaters, like similarly like most analog or like vinyl and tapes and VHS. They've all kind of had like a comeback in smaller niche markets, but I think movies are much more profoundly important to a lot of people. So I think people might look at better experiences and maybe consider where they're watching the movies. There's been for a long time, especially if you're in a big city like Kansas City, we have the most multiplexes per capita, and we have the fewest independent theaters. It's just us and the fine arts. We're the only.
Yeah, I was really sad to see the Tivoli go.
Yeah, and even when they were around, like they showed straight up art house foreign stuff, which is incredibly different from what we've always done, which is we do everything. We're like the only ones who do everything. That show Star Wars, but then we'll show the new Terry Gilliam film. This year we also were the only ones to show, or last year we showed his newest film as well. And then we'll show foreign films. We're the only ones that do everything. And because it's kind of hard, but I also love all the movies, so I want to show them all myself selfishly. But yeah, so I think it'll help. I think movies will come out in a totally different way for sure. Like there's going to be a lot of downsizing of the big chains. And that's for a number of reasons. I mean, again, you can't sustain those costs forever. It just was never going to be a thing. But people always say like, how long until Disney or Amazon buys one of them? That is absolutely the worst thing that could happen. Like people shouldn't say that in a positive way. Like having an even bigger company own the biggest company is not great. Yeah. And certainly right now they're on the closest edge to bankruptcy as they've ever been in this year. Likely they're going to be bought out by like an investment group that's already got big investment into them. But having AMC be bought by an Amazon or somebody like that is terrible for filmmakers and film goers, because for me, they likely a studio like Disney, if they buy their own theaters, especially something that big, they would just cut out. They would have Disney Plus and Disney theaters, and there would be most of our money, if you're showing first run movies, comes from Disney, whether it's Fox or Fox Searchlight or Disney proper or Lucasfilm, Marvel. Most of our revenue in the box office comes from them. So if they completely cut out theater owners, that would be detrimental to, I think, a lot of cinemas, plain, pure, and simple. But the Amazons and the Disneys of the world, I don't think care even as much as Netflix. Netflix does own a theater in LA, the Egyptian Theater, which is a beautiful historic theater, and they actually spent money rehabbing it and keeping it historic and keeping it. And they show other movies that are not just their films. Netflix does truly love movies. I will say that, like, they're the only major studio that's donated to movie theaters and movie theater employees since the pandemic's ended. They're the only ones that have just given us movies for free to help like us with our profits. They're the only people that even prior to this sent people out to make sure that their movies looked perfect on screen. I mean, Netflix does truly care about both theatrical and how movies are shot and presented on their platforms. But the scariest thing I think is less movies being made theatrically by the big studios like Warner Brothers. And Disney, if the shift goes to streaming, you're going to get less releases theatrically. And even watching stuff like The Mandalorian at home, I'm like, man, I would pay for a subscription to watch this in a theater. I think there probably would be people that want to watch things like that in a communal environment. So maybe we'll see that. I'm kind of hopeful that somebody like Legendary, who's been a big financier on a lot of films, will become a distributor, and they'll replace people like Disney and Warner that are going straight to streaming, and they want to keep the box office going because they're a big international group, and they own the rights to a lot of these films. Like Dune and King Kong, they're the majority financier. Warner Brothers is just a distributor on those. So I'm hopeful that Legendary will actually come out this as like, well, screw this, let's fill the void, let's believe in theaters. Let's keep chasing, especially those films. They should be making $500 million or $1 billion.
Yeah, totally. And then benefiting too. I mean, there's no reason that the distributor should not also be getting, some of that, in my opinion, at least. And you mentioned Netflix, who's, currently in my good corner because they have recently announced that they're going to be, or not announced technically officially, but it's been essentially leaked that David Lynch's new show is probably going to end up on Netflix, which is something that I'm just thrilled about. And David Lynch is someone who's actually, talked about how his films, he saw them really, lose out on that theater money. They used to do well in theaters, and then as time went on, he said the art house is now on HBO. It's on Netflix. It's no longer in your local art cinema places like the Tivoli that we mentioned. Do you think there's any possibility, because you did mention working with Netflix, do you think there's any possibility that we could potentially see like episodes of Lynch's new show shown at the Screenland Armour? I remember that I think it was like the Stranger Things season 2 premiere played at the Screenland. Would that be a possibility? Because that's something I would love to see.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't count it out. I mean, they're pretty game for stuff, and they've, we'll see. Like their shows are always kind of depends on what they want to do with them. But yeah, certainly. And I think if you're a distributor like A24, for example, you may be in the best position. They're less than a decade old studio that's just been every year getting bigger grosses on their films
and crushing it with everything that they're releasing.
Yeah, and releasing more films, winning Oscars. They're kind of curating, and now you have Neon, which is doing a lot of the same type of things. I think you might see some more of these, fully independent, very interesting studios spending, filling those other gaps of the, under $30 million movies, buying international films and releasing them here and finding those audiences. I think you might see them step it up and have even more releases, just because there's going to be a hole. And, I think that clearly both those people love movie theaters and cinema, and they understand that filmmakers by and large aren't making movies to be watched at home. And I think that maybe even more so, for a while it's been my opinion, and I think most filmmakers would probably agree, that filmmakers aren't making movies to be watched on Netflix. Like David Fincher, that Mank is like his lifelong project he's wanted to make for 15, 20 years. And the only people who are going to make it was a streamer, which of course he's going to say yes, because he can make it how he wants to make it. Yeah. But and we did have a theatrical, and normally it would have made a lot more money than it did this year. But he didn't make that movie to be watched at home. He made that movie. It's a movie about making movies. It's about this
great film.
Experience. Yeah. And I think you're seeing a lot of people go to those studios, right now to get their passion projects made, because they're all just needing content and they're getting those bucket list items checked. And then I think they're going to go through that experience, and they're going to say, well, it's not the same as a theatrical release. It's not in the zeitgeist. Like Mank should be on everybody's radars. Everybody should be talking about it. But because it didn't get a theatrical release, there wasn't the marketing. There wasn't. It almost feels like it didn't even happen when it comes out.
Which is crazy, because it's a David Fincher film. Like compare that to The Social Network, right? Which I think it's just as good of a film.
Mm-hmm. It's weird. Like streaming movies just kind of come and go, and like they didn't happen. Like they don't. It's like they're not. It's like TV kind of. They're like.
Do you think it's because nobody tells people that this is a film that you have to care about? You know what I mean? Like there's no buzz. It's not like the same as like, oh, Parasite, right? Like everybody knew that Parasite was a film that they should see because everybody was talking about it. And it feels like the buzz, has sort of been stripped from these movies that go straight to streaming. Do you think that's on the critics who aren't, is it on the studios? Like, what is that?
Don't you remember Bird Box? Don't you remember the buzz for that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a combination of things. So I think and this is what Wonder Woman's kind of going against. So, on the biggest level, you look at Wonder Woman, which normally would have at least a 60-day built marketing campaign up to the release. Most of it's in that next 30 days closest to the movie. But right now, we've only seen commercials released since maybe Thanksgiving, really just since December 1st. And you're not really seeing billboards because no one's out and about. You're not seeing like their normal ads. So it doesn't feel like it's everywhere like it normally is. And so part of that is, you just look at the ecosystem of like how long a movie when it's released theatrically stays in the conversation. So, they would start like the first trailer for Wonder Woman usually comes out 6 months before, but then really that 2 month lead up is just like, it is everywhere. Wonder Woman's billboards, online ads, trailers everywhere. It's everywhere. And then it comes out and everyone's talking about it. It's all over, the internet and Twitter, and reviews are everywhere, and people keep seeing it and keep talking about it. And for, 30 days or so after the release, they're just talking about it. And then, if it's an awards film, it gets brought back up in February when the Oscars come out or when the awards season starts, and you have another conversation. And then 3 months later, it's on video or VOD, and there's another boost because more people are seeing it. So for like 6 to 8 months, you're just a conversation of Wonder Woman or, whatever, or Mank in this example might have been. And you just have, this film that's just hovering for almost a full year in the zeitgeist. But, when it goes streaming and it's just kind of like, oh, we all saw it the same day. And then tomorrow another movie came out and we all watched that and we forgot about that. And it's just like, it comes and goes so quickly when it's on the streaming platform that it just doesn't hold our attention. It doesn't hold the conversation. And it'll be fascinating to see, like, I guess, like how they just diminish the value of a feature film, I guess.
Yeah.
As you said earlier, like the Screenland has, cultivated some of the absolute, my favorite viewing experiences I've ever had in my lifetime. Last month, Zach and I saw Lost Highway on the big screen, which is, as I alluded to, I'm a big David Lynch fan. So that was a huge treat for me. I've seen that movie like over a dozen times, and nothing even, it was still like a whole new experience just because I'd never seen it in that 4K transfer with the beautiful sound. So, I'm just so worried about the state of, independent, local cinemas like your own. And I'm just wondering, if anyone's listening that also feels the same way, what they can do to, help support their local cinema. And, should we boycott Disney Plus? Like, what's your thinking on all that? And also, when this video gets reposted after, because it's live right now, but it'll get reposted in a bit, where can people go? I'll put the links in the description box. Where can people go to, support you guys?
So there's a number of different things I think, and whether you're in Kansas City or whether you're in a different city, that most of these apply to you. So if your theaters are open, by and large, no matter what movie theater and what city you're in, you're not going to see huge numbers. I mean, the one that are most popular AMCs in the entire area, which is their most popular in the country, they're busy all weekend. So probably that's 12 shows. They had 300 people. So it sounds like a lot of people, but over 12 shows, you're talking like 20 or 30 people.
Is that like the Johnson County AMC?
It's the Berry Woods.
Oh, the Berry Woods. Really interesting.
Yeah. So you're talking 300 and some people over a weekend. Normally it'd be like 3,000 just for that one movie. So that's not a lot of people. You're likely going to have like 10 to 20 people per screening. And on, when you talk about my theaters, you're going to have, 2 to 10 people probably in most screens. There's just not the numbers out there. So if you're scared, if you want to go see movies, but you're like nervous because you don't want to be around crowds, you're probably not going to have a crowd around you. All of us already have distancing guidelines, but you're going to be able to be quite a distance away if you'd like to be from everybody. And I mean, you guys probably know, being here, there's not a lot of people that are in screenings. And if they are, they're in our biggest auditorium. I think our biggest show this month is like 34, 35 people. And that was in a 250 seat theater. So quite the distance. But so you can get out, you can see movies safely, in our theater, like there's a massive amount of precautions we're taking. People are starting to write articles about, it's not like going on an airline. It's not like going to a concert or even a school classroom, because you're not talking to anybody. It's safer than going to a restaurant. People are just seated, distance, looking straight forward, and they're not opening their mouth and talking. And you can wear a mask the whole time if you want. Outside of that, we've done things like a Patreon where we do, a weekly podcast, we do watch parties, we do trivia, we do all sorts of stuff. And that helps keeps us going. And then we do, we also have online rentals at Screenland Online. And most indie theaters around the country have that as well.
Yeah, everybody can check out that dope Cream Magazine documentary, Lester Bangs and Cream Magazine. Do you guys have on there? Great documentary.
It might have just ended last week. I can't remember.
Oh man, I plugged the wrong time. But yeah,
but we have a ton of things.
Oh, that Frank Zappa documentary, I'm super excited to check out as well. So anyway,
yeah, so we have they're all new releases. We have genre stuff, we have documentaries, and then we're starting to do some classics on there as well. We're working with a company to try to, there's no support, like I mentioned at the top. Things like The Croods 2 and Freaky, which are big Universal films, we don't have a way to rent those to people because they need to be on certain platforms. Mm-hmm. So there's this unfair advantage that AMC does have. So we are trying to find a platform, the independents are trying to find a way for us to be able to get those types of movies. And eventually there'll be the A24s, so, those types of films that'll be available for us as well. So there's going to be all these options probably, this time next year. Who the fuck knows what it's going to look like. But likely all these things will still be going because they have to, right? Like everything's changed so much. Our outdoor movie series will continue in the spring again and summer. But yeah, like you can see right now, we have some classics coming up. Give Me Shelter, the Rolling Stones documentary from the 70s coming up this weekend. We have the Karwai films coming up all in January 8th.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff you can do.
Yeah, one last question from me, Adam. Just as we talked about the evolving kind of shape of the industry and all that, one of the things that I wanted to just get your opinion on as a cinema owner was the now defunct business structure of MoviePass, which was essentially a structure of was that a horrible idea? Was that ever going to work? Could you talk a little bit about if that could be a model that's featured in the future?
Well, it was awesome while it lasted. It brought a lot of money to theaters and it brought a lot of new customers, I think, and certainly people were seeing movies that they never would have seen in theaters because it was free. So, AMC launched their A-list thing like a year and a half ago and to pretty big success. We were looking at doing it, again, like, the big chains have an advantage over all the small people. We have to get a little bit more creative. It's harder for us to offer what they can offer because they could subsidize their losses on the general customer. But, if we offer something like unlimited films, a lot of our film, regulars will come and take that, and that'll reduce all of our grosses and our overall income. So it's good, bad, So, we were going to launch a film membership this year. It's not gonna, obviously didn't happen because we were closed for a portion of the year, but maybe next year that'll happen. We'll see what happens. It's just I think it makes sense. The hardest thing is doing that for every movie. I think the way we were looking at it was an allocated amount of films rather than unlimited, like, a handful of new films and a handful of old films, for a very reduced price.
Yeah, because it seems like it would be, obviously, you guys got to make your money on stuff like Dune and, Matrix 4 or whatever. But, it seems like a great way to get people to, engage in foot traffic if it was like, any film that's already been released for like a year that you guys, I don't know. It just seems like a interesting concept, but yeah.
Yeah. And a lot could change and that might become more affordable if more of the big studios are going to streaming faster. And if their films become, more lucrative for us to show, because right now, movie tickets for like Wonder Woman, generally most of that goes to the studio and taxes, of like a $10 ticket, we would be normally making like $2, so it's not a great amount of money. So maybe that'll change. Hopefully, I don't think that they expect us to have the same requirements when they're also kind of dumping the film somewhere else and reducing our costs as well. So maybe we'll get a little bit more and it'll be more beneficial for us to offer something like that. Maybe it's more of a 50-50 split. But certainly I think you'll see a lot more people trying things like that. Our Patreon will continue and there will probably be a hybrid of like in-person and online film club type thing. So, we're all anticipating like really like nothing to get back to kind of normal, not for a long time, but like a level of normality in the theater in like May probably. and it might be sooner than that. I mean, James Bond said it's not going to move its date, and that's the end of March. We'll see what happens there. But I mean, yeah, there's a whole, 21 is going to be interesting because half the year is still going to be like this year, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully not, but the probability is, likely it won't be great until next year. But really, the next 2 months are the darkest for movie theaters and studios because there's no, after Wonder Woman, it's just a hard drop. Like, we have a handful of films and the genre films that I'm excited about, but they right now, we might be happy if the movie makes $2,000 after a couple weeks. Normally it might make 10 or 20 grand. So it's just so few people are coming out right now. And when we look at the colder months, we moved our Film Fest, Panic Fest into the spring so we could do an outdoor version of it too. But usually this time is when we have Panic Fest because it's a huge shot in the arm in an already slow part of the year. And we usually have a lot of Oscar films, but I don't even know what the Oscars are going to look like this year. I mean, right now it looks like Netflix is going to win most everything, and there's going to be a couple other noms here and there. But
that's a good like metaphor for the state of cinema. Netflix is going to win everything, and be a few other little prizes.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, the next 2 months are going to be the darkest, I think, for theater owners, unless there's a good stimulus package, which fingers crossed there might be for theater owners.
Yeah, well,
that bill you guys were talking about, didn't you have like a bill you were mentioning that was like hopefully to go up towards Congress about helping antique movie theaters or something like that?
Yeah, it is. So movie theaters lobbyists have joined hands with live theater and concert venues. So it's called Save Our Stages. Is the actual bill in Congress is, I can't remember what the numbers are, but you can sign up for a real easy way to just send your Congress people something is at saveyourcinema.com. But it's basically it's HR 7806 is what it is in Congress. But it'll help theaters specifically with grants, not loans, because especially in Missouri, our governor has not done anything. Kansas, there is a grant.
Carson,
Yeah, there was a grant. When we applied for the one grant that was available, they said movie theaters were not one of the most impacted industries. So, but we do need federal action. So, you guys, not just movie theaters, but concert venues and live performance. It's all in that same bill, and it's all grants. So they're supposed to work something out this week. If they don't, you're going to probably see some more theaters going under, especially like the big chains. I mean, they're just taking a beating, and so we'll see.
Yeah, well,
if anybody's watching the re-upload of this, we'll be sure to put that Save Our Cinemas link in the description. Adam, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Adam. We really appreciate it. And like Zach said, make sure to hit those links up and support your local cinema, guys. It really is so important. I mean, even regardless of the pandemic, these corporations are, taking more than their fair share. And as you alluded to with the federal response, I mean, so many corporations got these huge, cast influxions, just literally robbing the taxpayer. So it would be great if, small businesses, actual local businesses like your own were to get some of that as well. So yeah, guys, support your local cinema. And thanks so much, Adam. We appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing, some more movies at the Screenland coming up, especially I saw that you guys are going to be doing Wild at Heart. So, thanks for continuing to exhibit some,
we'll be there for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it.
Someone has to do it, and you filled that role marvelously. So again, thank you so much. It's really meaningful. To me, I consider it a community service.
Yeah. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care.